Let's get into some more pertinent immediate issues. 13 million Australians, as you know, locked up in their homes and cases rising. A lot of worry for business and growing calls now for the Morrison government to bring back JobKeeper. Employers, workers, even the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet want the scheme brought back, saying that the current $600 a week in disaster relief payments isn't enough. For their analysis on this and everything else, I'm joined by my economics panel here from Melbourne, business commentator Terry McCrann, and from Sydney Sky News business editor Ross Greenwood. Ross, will Josh Frydenberg budge on this, do you think?
Go for longer. State premiers effectively know that they're being subsidised by the federal government with these relief payments. Now, remember that JobKeeper was initially $1,500 a week. It fell to $1,200 a week. These emergency payments are $600 per week for those who qualify who have lost more than 20 hours a week in work. But the one important aspect of JobKeeper was it kept the employee attached to the employer. And so as a result, if now you suddenly find that that is broken, that link between the employee and the employer, it could very well be that that job is not there in the future when eventually things are opened up. Or indeed, the second part about this is that the employer simply can't find that employee when they want to find them in the future, because ultimately somebody could go broke. And the real problem here with our JobKeeper is that that link between the worker and the employer is broken without it being any sign of being repaired right now.
Look, there's a lot of sense in what Ross says, Terry. I just worry constantly about the debt burden, the deficit burden. We're talking about the games in 2032. I think that's about when we get out of deficit, all things being equal. What do you think of the idea?
Well, I think the Brisbane Games is just guaranteed we won't be getting out of deficit come 2032, Peter, although that was always a pipe dream. But to pick up on Ross's point, the big plus in JobKeeper was that keeping that link between the employer and the employee. I think, though, that it's probably not as big a risk now as it looked to be at the start of all this, because workers good workers are in such great demand, obviously, when they're allowed to work. Given the fact that we can't bring in the skills under the visa programs or indeed generalised population through the general migration program. The actual quantum is pretty much the same, $600 a week. JobKeeper started out, I think Ross said fortnight, but it was $1,500 a fortnight, $750 a week. So the quantum is about the same. It's where JobKeeper ended in March, when it ended in March. So I don't think you worry about, you can't ask for more money in the pocket. The question is really whether it's going to hurt that link between the employer and the worker.
Yeah, good point. Well, I think it'll play out very much in the next couple of days. Let's go down to Victoria. This Royal Commission into Crown Casino has hit the casino group with an extraordinary double whammy, declaring that the company is not a suitable licensee. This is counsel assisting, which is making the arguments, obviously, for the Melbourne casino licence, and that Executive Chairman Helen Coonan is unsuitable, they say, to occupy her job. Now, full disclosure, I was Helen Coonan's Chief of Staff at one time when she was a minister in the Howard government, and I also worked for Consolidated Press Holdings, a major shareholder of Crown. I never worked for Crown, but I think you should know all of that. Ross, to you first, counsel assisting submission on Coonan's suitability contradicts a finding in New South Wales in their inquiry, which effectively said she was the right person to fix all these problems with Crown. So what's happened?
So in this particular case, it really is the lack of confidence, and in particular, even some of her fellow directors have had, where there was obviously the allegations, and they were admitted, the Crown had not paid enough tax to the Victorian government in its gaming licence fees. Now, there was also suggestions that Helen Coonan had known this as early as February this year, but had not told some of her fellow directors until June. So this led to this finding. But it's a real problem for Crown, because remember, the Crown still has not opened its gaming floors in its new Sydney casino. And really, it's not until really the Independent Liquor and Gaming Authority, Philip Crawford, its chairman, are satisfied with Crown's behaviour that it's going to be allowed to open. Then, if suddenly it loses its licence in Victoria, it's already warned the Victorian government that it could breach some of its lending covenants to its lenders. So it's a big problem, especially if the person who's supposed to be leading them out of this mess suddenly finds themselves unsuitable as well. Yeah,
Terry, I mean, they haven't got the machines, the casino floor operating in Sydney. They're basically would be bleeding money, wouldn't they, in Victoria? We've had lockdowns 179 days today. I mean, they've been shut for most of last year. What's the end game? What happens to Crown in Melbourne in terms of their licence if that licence goes?
Well, it's become a real big issue, Peter, because it's also a huge hot potato for Dan Andrews, the Premier in Victoria, because he said that if the casino inquiry recommends that Crown be stripped of its licence, he will rip up the licence. Now, I think he probably wished he didn't say that, because that's where the casino inquiry is heading. You've got the counsel assisting saying that the Commission can find that it should be one of the outcomes. And secondly, it's obviously a huge worry for James Packer, who's got his entire personal fortune, almost his entire personal fortune, locked into those Crown shares. And the end game was supposed to be, A, Helen Coonan fixes all the problems, and B, she orchestrates a sale of the casino group to a new bidder, most probably the competing bidder, the competing casino group, Star. Now, all those things now are going to be very difficult to achieve, and certainly achieve anytime soon.
So true.
And look, it's a massive employer in Victoria, Terry. It's a massive entertainment precinct in Melbourne. That's a concern too.
Well, it's a huge concern, particularly for the Premier and the government, because do they really want to wipe out all those jobs and all that income, all those tax revenues?
And Daniel Andrews, remind me, Terry. So Daniel Andrews, remind me, he was a gaming minister at one stage, wasn't he?
He was a gaming minister through this process. I mean, and there's a game obviously to be played to tie Crown's bad behaviours to who exactly should have been in charge of stopping those bad behaviours, both the regulatory authority and the minister behind that, all through this period.
I tell you what, Peter, there's one other little thing about this. Do remember that if the government were to say, right, we're going to give the licence now to somebody else, Crown owns the buildings. So therefore, there's a real problem as well, because if you suddenly want to magically come up with a new casino operator, the fact of the matter is that Crown has got to do a deal with whichever new casino operator comes up, because it's going to take too long to build new facilities if you want to start from scratch. They're not going to do that.
Very good point, Ross. I didn't get the nexus there with the freehold. Hey, talk to me about the Reserve Bank, Ross, pouring cold water on suggestions of a post-COVID wage increase. It says the RBA said there's some signs of growth. This is the minutes of the July meeting. But, you know, I would have thought with immigration constrained, we might have a bit of a lift in wages.
Yeah, so Philip Lowe, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, a couple of times has now come out and said that he believes that business for too long has really been too almost miserly with workers, that they've actually tried to concentrate on bringing it down. But as I say, it's one of these really interesting points, because a lot of other employers out there right now will be telling you they simply can't get the workers, and they're having to pay way over the odds to get new ones or to hang on to them.